Hello, dear friends, and welcome back to another bone-chilling journey through the world of the unknown. If you're new here, make yourself comfortable, grab a warm drink, dim the lights, and prepare for a night of eerie tales and whispered legends. This channel is dedicated to exploring the most haunted places across the country, delving into the dark and mysterious histories that have left behind lingering presences. Tonight, we turn our attention to one of the most haunted cities in the world, New York. From the towering skyscrapers of Manhattan to the quiet, cobblestone streets of Brooklyn, New York is a city steeped in history, culture, and of course, the paranormal. Behind its gleaming skyline and bustling streets lie countless stories of tragedy, murder, and unexplained phenomena that have given rise to some of the most terrifying hauntings in the country. Whether it's the ghostly figures that roam the halls of old brownstones, the eerie whispers that echo through forgotten alleyways, or the shadowy presences that lurk in the city's oldest buildings, New York is a place where the past refuses to stay buried. Tonight, we will be diving deep into the most notorious haunted locations in New York, uncovering the chilling stories behind each one. From the infamous Amityville Horror House, where a gruesome massacre left behind a legacy of terror, to the haunted halls of the Dakota Building, where the echoes of tragedy still linger, each location has its own unique and spine-tingling history. We'll also explore the eerie corridors of the Merchant's House Museum, where the spirits of a 19th century family are said to still reside, and the Westbeth Artists Housing, a former Bell Labs building that has become a hotspot for paranormal activity. These are just a few of the many haunted places that make New York a city where the veil between the living and the dead is at its thinnest. As we journey through these haunted landmarks, we'll hear first-hand accounts from those who have experienced the unexplainable. Witnesses who claim to have seen apparitions, heard voices from beyond the grave, and felt the chilling presence of unseen forces. We'll also examine the historical events that may have given rise to these hauntings, from tragic deaths to unsolved mysteries, and explore whether there is any truth to the rumors that these places are truly cursed. So, if you're ready to step into the shadows of New York's most haunted locations and uncover the secrets hidden within their walls, press play and join us on this spine-chilling expedition. But be warned, once you enter this world of ghostly echoes and forgotten souls, you may never look at New York the same way again. The Merchant's House Museum, a time capsule of tragedy and ghosts tucked away on East 4th Street in Manhattan, the Merchant's House Museum stands as a rare architectural gem and a living testament to New York's 19th century history. Built in 1832, this Federal-style row house is one of the city's oldest surviving private residences, preserved in remarkable detail to reflect the life of the affluent Treadwell family who lived there for nearly a century. However, beneath its pristine woodwork and antique furnishings lies a darker legacy, one steeped in tragedy, heartbreak, and the lingering presence of those who once called it home. The house is often referred to as the little girl in the attic, due to the haunting legend of Gertrude Treadwell, the youngest daughter of the family, whose spirit is said to still roam the halls of the house she loved so dearly. The Treadwell family moved into the house in 1835, shortly after it was completed. Seabury Treadwell, a prosperous hardware merchant, spared no expense in furnishing the home with opulent decor, fine china, and the latest 19th century comforts. The family thrived in their new residence, raising 8 children within its walls. However, as the decades passed, the house became a place of isolation and sorrow. By the early 20th century, the Treadwell children had grown and moved out, leaving only Seabury's youngest daughter, Gertrude, to care for her aging parents. When Seabury and his wife, Eliza, passed away in 1865 and 1869 respectively, Gertrude remained in the house alone, becoming increasingly reclusive and eccentric. She spent the remainder of her life preserving the home exactly as it had been during her childhood, refusing to let time alter the space she cherished. Gertrude died in 1933 at the age of 93, and the house remained sealed for nearly 2 decades before being opened to the public as a museum in 1961. It was then that the strange occurrences began. Visitors and staff alike reported an unsettling energy within the house, with many claiming to hear soft footsteps, whispers, and the faint sound of a woman humming. The most frequently reported phenomenon is the scent of violets, a fragrance closely associated with Gertrude, who was known to wear violet-scented perfume in her youth. Some believe that Gertrude's deep emotional attachment to the house prevented her spirit from moving on, leaving her trapped in the home where she had spent her entire life. One of the most chilling accounts comes from a former museum employee who worked late hours cataloging artifacts in the house's basement. She claimed to hear a faint voice calling her name from the upstairs hallway, despite being alone in the building. When she cautiously ascended the stairs, she found no one there, only the lingering scent of violets. Another employee reported seeing a figure in a long, white dress standing at the foot of the grand staircase, only for the apparition to vanish the moment she blinked. The museum's director at the time, a skeptical historian, initially dismissed these reports as overactive imaginations, until he himself experienced something he could not explain. While working late in the parlor, he claimed to see a woman in 19th-century attire standing by the fireplace. When he turned to call for help, the woman was gone, leaving behind only the distinct impression that she had been watching him. Beyond Gertrude's spirit, other paranormal activity has been reported throughout the house. The attic, in particular, is said to be a hot spot of supernatural energy. Visitors have described feeling an overwhelming sense of dread when entering the small, dimly lit space, as though they are being watched. Some claim to hear the faint sound of a child giggling, while others report the sensation of an unseen presence brushing past them. The most harrowing encounter was recounted by a group of paranormal investigators who visited the museum in the early 2000s. Equipped with thermal cameras and audio recorders, they captured what they described as an orb-like energy moving through the air in the attic, accompanied by a whispering voice that seemed to plead, "Let me out." The tragic fate of Gertrude Treadwell. Gertrude Treadwell's life was one of quiet devotion and deep emotional ties to the house she called home. Born in 1840, she was the youngest of 8 children, growing up in a world of wealth and privilege within the walls of the merchant's house. As a young woman, she was known for her delicate beauty and refined sensibilities, embodying the ideals of Victorian femininity. However, her life took a dramatic turn when she was jilted by her fiancé, a man from a prominent New York family. The heartbreak left her emotionally scarred, and she never married, instead dedicating herself to caring for her aging parents in the only home she had ever known. After the deaths of both her father and mother, Gertrude remained in the house alone, surrounded by the memories of her past. She became increasingly reclusive, rarely venturing beyond the front door, and grew obsessed with preserving the house exactly as it had been in her youth. She refused to allow any changes to the furniture, the wallpaper, or even the placement of objects, as if by keeping the house untouched, she could somehow hold on to the people she had lost. Over time, her isolation deepened, and she became a near mythical figure in the neighborhood, a lonely old woman who lived in a house frozen in time. Neighbors and relatives described Gertrude as eccentric but harmless, a woman who clung to the past with an almost desperate intensity. She was said to spend hours in the parlor, sitting in silence as though waiting for someone to return. Some claimed she spoke to the portraits of her parents, as if expecting them to answer. Others whispered that she had become unhinged by grief, unable to move on from the tragedies that had shaped her life. Whatever the truth, one thing is certain. When Gertrude died in 1933 at the age of 93, she left behind a house filled with her presence, a space where her love, sorrow, and longing had become deeply embedded in the very fabric of the walls. It is this intense emotional connection that many believe is responsible for her lingering presence in the merchant's house. Visitors and staff have reported a variety of inexplicable occurrences over the years, many of which seem to center around Gertrude's former bedroom, located on the 2nd floor. The room, meticulously preserved with her original bed, vanity, and personal effects, is said to be the site of some of the most intense paranormal activity. Some visitors have claimed to see the faint outline of a figure standing near the bed, while others report hearing the sound of someone moving about the room, despite being completely alone. One of the most chilling accounts comes from a tour guide who worked at the museum in the 1980s. One evening, as she was preparing to lock up, she noticed that Gertrude's bedroom door, which was always kept closed, was slightly ajar. Curious, she pushed it open, only to find the room in perfect order, yet something about it felt off. As she stepped inside, she felt an overwhelming sense of sadness, as though the very air was thick with sorrow. It is this intense emotional connection that many believe is responsible for her lingering presence in the merchant's house. Visitors and staff have reported a variety of inexplicable occurrences over the years, many of which seem to center around Gertrude's former bedroom, located on the second floor. The room, meticulously preserved with her original bed, vanity, and personal effects, is said to be the site of some of the most intense paranormal activity. Some visitors have claimed to see the faint outline of a figure standing near the bed, while others report hearing the sound of someone moving about the room, despite being completely alone. One of the most chilling accounts comes from a tour guide who worked at the museum in the 1980s. One evening, as she was preparing to lock up, she noticed that Gertrude's bedroom door, which was always kept closed, was slightly ajar. Curious, she pushed it open, only to find the room in perfect order, yet something about it felt off. As she stepped inside, she felt an overwhelming sense of sadness, as though the very air was thick with sorrow. Suddenly, she heard the unmistakable sound of a woman sighing softly, followed by the faint rustle of fabric, as if someone had just passed by. When she turned around, the room was empty, but the door had quietly shut behind her. She later admitted that she ran from the room, too frightened to investigate further. Another unsettling experience was reported by a group of schoolchildren who visited the museum on a field trip in the 1990s. While exploring the upstairs hallway, one of the students claimed to see a woman in a long, white dress standing at the top of the staircase. When he pointed her out to the others, they saw nothing, only an empty hallway bathed in the soft glow of the gaslight-style chandeliers. Moments later, the student reported feeling a cold hand brush against his shoulder, though no one else was near him. The teacher who accompanied the group later admitted that she had heard similar stories before, but had always dismissed them as the product of overactive imaginations, until that day. The phantom child of the merchant's house. Among the many eerie occurrences reported within the Merchant's House Museum, none are as chilling as the legend of the phantom child. While Gertrude Treadwell's presence is often felt throughout the home, there are also accounts of a small child wandering the halls, sometimes seen as a fleeting shadow, other times as a fully formed spectral figure. Witnesses describe a young girl, no older than 6, dressed in a white nightgown, her dark hair pulled back in a neat braid. Unlike Gertrude's sorrowful apparition, the child's presence is often accompanied by a sense of innocence and playfulness, yet it is this very contrast that makes the sightings all the more unsettling. The origins of the phantom child remain a mystery, with no records indicating that any child had ever died within the house. However, some historians speculate that the spirit may be connected to one of the Treadwell family's servants. During the 19th century, wealthy households like the Treadwells often employed live-in servants, including young children who worked as housemaids or nannies. It is possible that one such child met an untimely end within the house, whether due to illness, accident, or even mistreatment. If this were the case, the child's spirit may have remained forever bound to the place where she spent her final days. One of the earliest documented encounters with the phantom child dates back to the 1960s, shortly after the Merchant's House was opened to the public as a museum. A docent who was giving a private tour to a group of history enthusiasts reported seeing a small girl darting through the hallway on the second floor. Thinking it was a visitor's child who had wandered off, she called out, asking the girl to wait. But as she approached, the child vanished before her eyes, leaving behind only the faint sound of giggling. The tour group, unaware of what had happened, continued their visit without incident, but the docent later admitted that she had never felt such an overwhelming sense of unease within the house before. Since then, numerous other accounts have surfaced, each adding to the legend of the phantom child. Some visitors claim to have felt a small hand brush against theirs, only to turn around and find no one there. Others report hearing the sound of tiny footsteps running up and down the stairs late at night, long after the museum has closed its doors. One particularly harrowing encounter was described by a paranormal investigator who visited the museum in the early 2000s. While conducting an overnight investigation in the upstairs bedrooms, he claimed to see the faint outline of a child standing in the doorway of Gertrude's old room. When he attempted to speak to the figure, it simply stared at him for a moment before vanishing into the darkness. The investigator later admitted that he had encountered many strange phenomena in his career, But nothing had ever chilled him quite like that moment. Despite the lack of concrete historical evidence, many believe that the phantom child is real, a lost soul who refuses to leave the only home she ever knew. Whether she is the spirit of a servant, a child who once lived in the house, or merely a figment of collective imagination, one thing is certain: those who visit the merchant's house may find themselves forever changed by the experience, as if the past itself is reaching out to remind them that some secrets never fade. The Dakota Building, a legacy of tragedy and the paranormal, standing tall on the western edge of Central Park. The Dakota Building is one of New York City's most iconic and architecturally distinctive landmarks. Completed in 1884, this grand residential complex was once considered the epitome of luxury living, boasting state-of-the-art amenities and a reputation as one of the most prestigious addresses in Manhattan. However, beneath its ornate facade and storied history lies a dark undercurrent of tragedy, mystery, and reported paranormal activity that has cemented its place among the city's most haunted locations. From its association with the infamous Manson family to the shocking assassination of John Lennon, the Dakota has borne witness to some of the most disturbing events in New York's history, events that many believe have left behind lingering, otherworldly presences. The building's eerie reputation first gained national attention in 1966 when Roman Polanski and his wife, actress Sharon Tate, moved into apartment 1B. At the time, Tate was one of Hollywood's rising stars, and the couple's presence at the Dakota seemed to embody the glamour and sophistication of New York's elite. However, less than 2 years later, tragedy struck. In August 1969, Tate was brutally murdered in Los Angeles by members of the Manson family, an event that shocked the world and cast a long shadow over the Dakota. Though Tate had lived in the building for only a short time, many believe that her tragic fate left an indelible mark on the property. Locals and residents have since claimed to hear the faint sound of a woman sobbing in the halls near apartment 1B, while others report a lingering scent of jasmine, the fragrance Tate was known to wear. Some even say that on certain nights, a ghostly figure resembling Tate can be seen standing at the window of the apartment, staring out into the darkness as if searching for something, or someone, that was taken from her. But the Dakota's most infamous and widely recognized haunting is undoubtedly linked to the death of John Lennon. On December 8, 1980, the former Beatle returned to the Dakota after a recording session, only to be gunned down by a deranged fan outside the building's archway. The event sent shockwaves through the world of music and popular culture, and ever since, the Dakota has been a place of pilgrimage for Lennon's fans. Many believe that his spirit lingers in the very place where he spent his final moments. Some claim that on the anniversary of his death, a faint melody of Imagine can be heard drifting through the air, though no source is ever found. Others insist that a palpable sense of sadness settles over the building on that day, as if the entire structure mourns the loss of one of its most beloved residents. Beyond these high-profile tragedies, the Dakota is also steeped in lesser-known but equally unsettling paranormal accounts. Staff and longtime residents have reported strange occurrences over the years, including unexplained cold spots, flickering lights, and the sensation of being watched by unseen eyes. Some have described hearing the sound of children laughing in empty hallways, while others speak of doors opening and closing on their own, as if guided by an invisible force. One of the most persistent legends involves a shadowy figure that has been spotted in the building's elevator. According to multiple accounts, the figure appears as a tall, cloaked man with a pale face and hollow eyes. He never speaks, never moves, and seems to vanish the moment he is acknowledged. Some believe this figure is the ghost of a former resident who died in the building under mysterious circumstances, while others suggest it may be something far more sinister, an entity that does not belong to the world of the living. The Amityville Horror House, a legacy of blood and terror nestled in the quiet town of Amityville, just a short drive from New York City, stands one of the most infamous haunted houses in American history. Known simply as the Amityville Horror House, this seemingly ordinary colonial-style home at 112 Ocean Avenue became the epicenter of one of the most terrifying paranormal cases ever documented. What began as a gruesome murder in 1974 quickly spiraled into a chilling tale of demonic possession, poltergeist activity, and an unshakable sense of dread that has persisted for decades. Whether the horrors of Amityville were the result of supernatural forces or an elaborate hoax, the house remains a symbol of fear and mystery, drawing paranormal investigators, thrill seekers, and curious tourists to this day. The nightmare began on November 13, 1974, when Ronald DeFeo Jr., a 23-year-old with a criminal record and a history of violence, shot and killed his entire family in their sleep. In a cold-blooded act of brutality, DeFeo entered each of his parents' and siblings' bedrooms and fired a single shot into each of their heads, ensuring that they never woke up. When questioned by police, DeFeo claimed that he had been possessed by voices that told him to kill his family, an explanation that only deepened the horror of the crime. The murders were shocking enough on their own, but what followed would take the story into the realm of the supernatural. Just 13 months after the massacre, George and Kathy Lutz and their 3 children moved into the house, believing they had purchased a dream home in a peaceful Long Island town. However, their dream quickly turned into a living nightmare. Within days of moving in, the family began experiencing bizarre and terrifying phenomena: cold spots that came and went without explanation, strange smells that had no source, and the constant sound of buzzing flies despite the winter season. Kathy claimed to see shadowy figures lurking in the corners of rooms, while George reported waking up in the middle of the night to find himself standing in front of the closet, fully dressed, with no memory of how he had gotten there. One of the most disturbing aspects of the Lutz family's ordeal was the discovery of a secret room in the basement, a space that had been bricked up and hidden from view. When George and a friend broke through the wall, they found a room covered in what appeared to be handprints smeared in blood. The discovery was deeply unsettling, especially considering that the room had been sealed for years before the Lutz family arrived. Some speculated that DeFeo had used the room for occult rituals, while others believed it had been a site of unspeakable horrors long before the murders. As the days passed, the paranormal activity escalated. Doors slammed shut on their own, windows burst open despite being locked, and Kathy claimed to hear a voice whispering in her ear, urging her to get out. Perhaps the most harrowing encounter came when George discovered a statue of the Virgin Mary in their son's bedroom, its eyes filled with tears. The statue had been placed there by the family as a source of comfort, but now it seemed to be crying, as if mourning something unseen. The final straw came when George awoke to find himself covered in scratches and bruises, with no memory of how they had appeared. The family fled the house in the middle of the night, leaving behind most of their belongings, and never returned. The Westbeth Artists Housing, a symphony of spirits tucked away in Manhattan's West Village, the Westbeth Artists Housing stands as a unique blend of historical significance and artistic vibrancy. Originally constructed in 1907 as the headquarters for Bell Telephone Laboratories, this sprawling complex was once the heart of technological innovation, housing some of the most groundbreaking scientific discoveries of the early 20th century. However, beneath its industrial charm and artistic resurgence lies a deeper, more unsettling history, one that has given rise to numerous reports of paranormal activity, making Westbeth one of New York's most haunted locations. The building's transformation from a cutting-edge research facility to a thriving artists' community is a fascinating story in itself. In the 1970s, the abandoned Bell Labs complex was repurposed into affordable housing for artists, offering spacious lofts and creative workspaces to struggling painters, musicians, and performers. The conversion was a success, attracting a diverse and eclectic mix of residents who helped shape the cultural landscape of New York. Yet, despite its vibrant artistic energy, many who have lived and worked within Westbeth speak of an eerie presence that lingers within its walls, an unexplainable energy that seems to defy logic and reason. One of the most frequently reported phenomena at Westbeth is the sound of disembodied voices echoing through the halls. Residents describe hearing faint whispers, sometimes in languages they do not recognize, drifting through the corridors late at night. Some claim to hear the distant sound of typing keys, as if an unseen presence is still working at an old desk long after the building has emptied for the night. Others report the sensation of being watched, as though an invisible force is observing them from the shadows. These experiences have led many to believe that the spirits of former Bell Labs employees still haunt the premises, unable to let go of the place where they spent their working lives. Perhaps the most chilling accounts come from musicians who have lived in Westbeth over the years. Some have reported waking in the middle of the night to the sound of a grand piano playing itself in an empty room. Others claim that their instruments have been mysteriously tuned or played while they were away, leaving behind melodies they did not compose. One particularly harrowing encounter was described by a composer who lived in the building in the 1980s. He claimed that while working on a piece late one night, he heard a haunting violin melody coming from an adjacent room. When he followed the sound, he found the room completely empty, yet the music continued, growing louder and more intense before suddenly stopping. The shadow in the courtyard. A chilling encounter among the many unsettling experiences reported at Westbeth Artist Housing. One of the most frequently described phenomena is the appearance of a shadowy figure in the building's courtyard. Witnesses describe a tall, featureless silhouette that seems to blend into the darkness, its form shifting and flickering like a mirage. Unlike the more defined apparitions reported elsewhere in the building, this figure does not appear to have a discernible face, nor does it move in a way that suggests a living person. Instead, it simply stands, motionless, watching. Some residents claim to have seen it lingering near the entrance of the courtyard, while others report spotting it in the dead of night, standing alone beneath the dim glow of the streetlights. One of the most harrowing accounts comes from a long-time resident who had lived in Westbeth for over a decade. She described a particularly unnerving encounter that occurred on a cold November night in the early 2000s. As she returned from a late-night walk through the West Village, she noticed a figure standing near the courtyard gate. At first, she assumed it was another resident waiting for a taxi or perhaps a friend of a neighbor. However, as she approached, she realized that the figure was not moving. Its posture was unnaturally stiff, its arms hanging limply at its sides, and its head tilted slightly forward, as though studying her. The woman later recalled that the moment she made eye contact, though she could not see any actual eyes, the temperature around her dropped drastically. She felt an overwhelming sense of dread settle over her, as though something unseen was pressing against her chest, making it difficult to breathe. She tried to speak, to ask the figure if they needed help, but her voice caught in her throat. Before she could take another step, the figure simply vanished, as though it had never been there at all. Other residents have reported similar experiences, describing the same sensation of an oppressive presence in the courtyard, even when no one is visibly there. Some claim to feel an unseen force watching them, while others report hearing faint footsteps behind them, only to turn around and find no one there. The phenomenon has become so well known among Westbeth's residents that many avoid the courtyard late at night, preferring to take alternate routes when returning to their apartments. If you enjoyed this journey through one of the most haunted cities in the world, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more spine-chilling tales. Share your own experiences in the comments below. Have you ever encountered something unexplainable in New York or another historic city? What other haunted locations would you like to see explored in future episodes? Your curiosity fuels this channel, and I can't wait to hear from you. Until next time, stay curious, stay brave, and remember, sometimes the past isn't as far behind us as we think. Thank you for watching, and may your own journeys through history be filled with wonder, mystery, and just the right amount of eerie anticipation. Good night, and sweet dreams, if you dare.